recording it anyway, because it's what I observed, and I've learned not to discard observations I can't immediately explain. The depth sounder was running continuously from the anchor drop. The reading held at 52 meters. Then, at 4:31, 8 minutes after anchoring, it flickered. The sounder reading dropped to 49 meters for approximately 4 seconds, then returned to 52. 3 meters of variation in the depth reading directly below the hull, with no change in weather or vessel position. Something moved below us, or the sounder was responding to something other than the seabed. I noted the time and wrote it in the margin of the binder page. The alignment procedure. While we waited, I used the time to complete the steps in the protocol that don't require an active signal. The anchor was set. The lantern bearing needed to be verified precisely. The binder gives a specific compass bearing for the lantern plate, not just a general direction. I found the bearing, 047 degrees magnetic. The plate, as mounted on the lantern housing, faces along the vessel's center line when she's heading northeast. With the anchor set and the vessel swinging to her road in the current, the heading would vary. I needed to know how much it was varying and whether the plate was staying within an acceptable arc of the required bearing. I spent approximately 20 minutes with a compass on the lantern housing deck, tracking the vessel's swing. The current here runs northeast to southwest, the same axis as the coordinate bearing, which is either a coincidence or a reason. Morwenna was built with her plate on the center line. The vessel swings within an arc of approximately 12 degrees either side of the required bearing. The binder doesn't give a bearing tolerance. I don't know if 12 degrees of variation is acceptable. What I can say is that when the vessel's bow points northeast, which it does for roughly 60% of each swing cycle, the plate is at 47 degrees and the geometry is exact. The system was designed for a vessel anchored in this current on this bearing. The swing is not a problem, it's accounted for. At 4:47 I checked the signal interval, 10 seconds. I counted 3 full cycles before I recorded it. 10 seconds, consistent. The signal had moved 1 second toward the threshold while we were working. I went forward and told Hannah, the lantern base, second compartment. While Hannah monitored the signal from the foredeck, I went back into the lantern housing to search for a second cylinder. My reasoning from the previous recording, harness tag numbered 1 implies a sequence, cylinder only contained 1 harness, had been running in the background the whole crossing. If descent number 2 was equipped, the equipment has to be somewhere on this vessel. The first compartment panel is where I found the binder and the cylinder. I checked the lantern column base systematically, moving around its circumference, looking for a second panel or a second mounting point. The column is approximately 2 meters in diameter at its base, and the interior space around it is tight. I was working by flashlight and by feel as much as by sight. On the port side of the column base, 180 degrees from the first panel, there is a bracket, steel, bolted to the column, at the same height as the first panel's handle. The bracket has a retention clip, the same design as the clip in the descent log slot, the type that holds a cylinder securely in a mount. The clip is engaged. The cylinder it was holding is not there. The bracket face has a label stamped into the steel, Descent Unit T6, Observer 2. The surface observer, the one who stays on deck while descent observer goes down. The surface observer's equipment was here. Someone removed it. The same person who removed the descent log or a different person, I can't determine. But the bracket is present, the retention clip is intact, and the cylinder that should be in it is gone. I examined the bracket carefully for any additional markings or attached materials. Nothing on the bracket itself. But on the column surface directly above the bracket, someone has scratched 3 characters into the paint with something sharp. Not stamped. Scratched, hurriedly, the lines uneven. The characters are LC L Carter. Carter was here in this specific space at this specific bracket. and scratched their initials into the paint above it. That's not documentation. That's the kind of mark you leave when you don't have time for documentation, or when you know the documentation will be removed. Carter left something that couldn't be erased without grinding the paint off the column. I put my finger on the scratched letters and held it there for a moment longer than I needed to. Then Hannah called down from the deck. 11 seconds. I came up through the hatch, and she was standing at the bow with the compass in one hand and her other hand resting on the anchor chain. She said the interval had gone to 11 while I was below. She'd counted 4 cycles, consistent. The signal was back at threshold. I told her what I'd found, the second bracket, the missing cylinder, the initials. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Carter was the surface observer." I said, "That's what I think." She said, "Which means someone descended. In 1974, someone other than Carter went down." I said I didn't know who. She said, "Neither do I." And she said it in a way that meant she had a theory and wasn't ready to share it. I recognized that register. I've been recognizing it more frequently. I noted it and let it go. The entry window, I checked the time, 4:59 in the morning. The window closes. I'm working from the timestamp on the closure document and the elapsed time since we found it at approximately 5:40. 40 minutes. The signal at 11 seconds. The lantern plate at the required bearing. The anchor set within tolerance. The cable in the compartment. The harness on the deck where I left it after the cylinder opening. Every operational condition in the protocol is satisfied except one. The surface observer equipment is missing. The cylinder for Observer 2 is gone. Whatever it contained, a second harness, a second laminated card, equipment for the person who stays on deck, we don't have it. Hannah said, "The protocol doesn't say the surface observer needs equipment. It says maintain position and line of sight. I can do that without a harness." She's right. The surface observer doesn't descend. The harness is for the descent observer. The surface observer's cylinder might have contained communications equipment, or a timing device, or documentation, but the core requirement is presence and line of sight. Those don't require a cylinder. I asked her which of us descends. She said, "You." I want to document the moment she said it, because the way she said it matters. No pause, no working through options. The way you answer a question, whose answer you've known for a long time and have been waiting to be asked. I've seen that quality in her before, at the harbor, when she identified Morwenna without hesitation from a partial description, when she knew the anchor windlass workaround before I'd finished describing the problem. There is a category of knowledge Hannah has about this system that she has not shared the origin of. I'm recording that observation now, in this moment, because in the next several minutes I am going to be underwater, and she is going to be the only person who knows where I am. She said it without hesitation and without explanation. I waited to see if she'd add something. She didn't. She picked up the binder and turned to the cable deployment section and began reading it again, which meant the decision was made and she was moving to the next problem. I have questions about that. I have questions about why she answered without hesitation and what she knows about the descent that I don't. I'm going to have those questions answered before I go over the side of this vessel into 50 meters of water. But not in the next 35 minutes while we're rigging the cable. After, or during, however it comes up. The cable. We ran it from the compartment through the lantern housing deck hatch, over the anchor windlass, Hannah's workaround from the harbor, using the windlass sheave as a cable guide rather than a purpose-built pulley, and down through a deck hawse to the water. The geometry isn't what the binder specifies, but it holds the cable on the correct vertical axis, directly below the lantern column, directly above the coordinate. The cable end with the connection ring went into the water first. I watched it go down, the dark wire disappearing into black water, the surface closing over it without any visible disturbance. 50 meters of water above the seabed, 38 more to the structure, 88 meters total. The cable spool in the compartment holds 92 meters, 4 meters of margin. Hannah ran the windlass in slow reverse to pay out cable. The spool turned. The cable ran. When the connection ring reached the bottom, or what we're treating as the bottom, we have no way to confirm contact. The tension on the cable went slack, and Hannah stopped the windlass. She locked the drum. The cable hangs from the vessel to the seabed, taut under its own weight, directly below the lantern plate, directly above the coordinate. I put the harness on. Chest straps, shoulder straps, the central D-ring at the sternum. The canvas is stiff, but the buckles work. I clipped the connection ring, the carabiner from the cylinder, to the D-ring and ran the cable through it. The cable runs through the ring freely. That's the descent mechanism. I hold the cable with both hands. The ring keeps me on the cable if I lose grip, and I go down hand over hand at whatever rate I can manage. 50 meters. I've been trying not to calculate how long that takes at a manageable pace, and I haven't entirely succeeded. Hannah checked the harness connections without being asked. Tugged each strap, checked the D-ring gate, ran her hand along the cable to the water. She said, "Signal is stable." I said I knew. She said, "Window closes in 22 minutes." I said I knew that too. She positioned herself at the bow, port side, where she has a direct line of sight to the descent point and to the cable entry. She said she wouldn't move from that position. I said I knew. The signal is coming up through the cable now. I can feel it in my hands where I'm holding the wire, a vibration 11 seconds between pulses, transmitted from whatever is below through 90 meters of steel cable to my palms. The system is connected. The cable is the path, and I am holding the path, and the path is telling me something is down there. I'm at the rail. The water is 4 feet below the deck edge, dark. The running lights catch the surface, and it gives back nothing. Hannah says my name, once, not a question. I step to the rail, and the cable goes taut, and I look back at her on the bow, and she nods once, and I go over the